Have you ever felt that something inside you is shifting, but you can't quite explain what it is? You wake up one morning and the world feels a little quieter, a little less certain. The things that once thrilled you now feel hollow. The people who used to feel close now feel like strangers in a story you no longer belong to. No, you're not falling apart. You're awakening. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists, but what you look at disappears." And perhaps what you're experiencing now is not a breakdown, but a breakthrough. A sacred unraveling of everything that was never truly you. You're not here by accident. If this message has found you, it's because some deeper part of your psyche has called it forth. A part of you is ready to stop running, ready to stop clinging to identities that no longer fit, ready to walk into the unknown, even if your hands still tremble. Because here's the secret that no one tells you. The chaos you feel inside, the uncertainty, the ache. It's not a flaw. It's a signal, a sacred whisper from your soul that says, it's time. Time to shed the masks. Time to let go of the story you've been told about who you should be. Time to step out of survival mode and into the light of your authentic self. This isn't about self-help mantras or quick-fix positivity. Jung never promised ease. He promised truth. And truth often arrives cloaked in discomfort. It dismantles before it rebuilds. It humbles before it empowers. And in that raw, vulnerable space, you find what can never be given to you by the world. Yourself. Not the self that performs, not the self that pleases, but the one that quietly watches beneath it all. The one that was never lost, only buried. Today, we begin a journey, not outward, but inward, into the shadow, into the silence, into the parts of yourself you've been taught to hide, deny, or exile, because within those parts lies your power. This isn't a video to make you feel better. It's a mirror, one that reflects who you truly are beneath the expectations, the wounds, the noise. If you felt disconnected, exhausted, uncertain, good. You're not asleep anymore. You're on the threshold of transformation. And from this point on, your task is no longer to fit in. Your task is to remember. To remember who you were before the world told you who to be. To return home, not to a place, but to a presence, your own. So take a breath. Let everything you think you know fall away. Because what comes next is not just insight, it is initiation. And your soul has been waiting for this moment a very, very long time. Sign number 1. You begin to question everything you once believed to be true. It often starts quietly, not with a dramatic event, but with a strange unease, a growing discomfort in your chest, a restlessness you can't name. Suddenly, the goals you chased so fiercely no longer feel like they matter. The relationships you once poured yourself into begin to feel misaligned, and the beliefs you held as unquestionable truths start to wobble like loose stones beneath your feet. This is not a breakdown, it is a breakthrough. Carl Jung called it a symbolic death, the inner crumbling of what no longer serves the evolving soul. It's the collapse of the old mental scaffolding, the architecture of identity that once held your life together. But now that structure feels too small for the vastness of who you're becoming. You begin to ask, what do I truly value? Who am I beneath my roles? Am I living a life of meaning, or merely performing one that was handed to me? And these aren't fleeting thoughts. They keep you up at night. They echo in quiet moments. You start to notice how much of your life has been shaped by fear, by duty, by unconscious loyalty to other people's expectations. The path you thought was yours no longer feels like home. But this is not a crisis, it's an awakening. The mind calls it confusion, but the soul calls it liberation. Jung taught us that we live in layers: persona, ego, shadow, self. And in this moment, the mask begins to slip. The persona, the version of you designed to function in society, starts to feel foreign. Something deeper stirs. a voice within that says there must be more. This unraveling isn't meant to break you. It's meant to clear space, because you cannot grow into who you truly are if you're still clinging to who you were trained to be. Like a snake shedding its skin, this questioning is not optional. It is biological, spiritual, necessary, and it is deeply uncomfortable. You might feel lost, as if the ground beneath you has vanished. You may try to cling to old routines, old relationships, old beliefs, but they no longer hold. They feel heavy, hollow, even suffocating. Why? Because your consciousness has already begun to expand, and everything that doesn't resonate with your new frequency is naturally falling away. This isn't failure, it's evolution. And as terrifying as it feels to stand in the space between what was and what's next, that emptiness is sacred. It's the womb of your becoming, the dark soil where seeds of your truest self are beginning to germinate. Let yourself question, let yourself doubt, let yourself not know, because in that not knowing, you are re-entering the mystery. And the mystery is where the soul speaks. The world may not understand. People may tell you you've changed, and they'll be right. You are no longer satisfied with surface-level living. You crave depth, truth, alignment. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a new story, one where you are no longer a character in someone else's script, but the author of your own becoming. So ask the questions, dismantle the narratives, let the old illusions fall, because what remains is real. And the truth you uncover through this sacred inquiry will not just change your life, it will give you back your soul. Sign number 2. You begin to feel a natural disconnection from your past. At first, it's subtle. You return to an old place, one that used to feel like home, and suddenly, it doesn't. The colors seem duller. The conversations feel hollow. You laugh, but something in you remains untouched, unmoved. You wonder, was it always like this? Or have I changed? That question is not a symptom of confusion. It is a sign of growth. Carl Jung believed that transformation does not begin with answers. It begins with a shift in resonance. And that shift often shows itself not in what you gain, but in what you no longer cling to. You look around and realize the things that once made you feel alive, certain relationships, habits, passions, now feel distant. You try to recapture the old spark, but it won't reignite. And it's not because something is wrong. It's because you are no longer who you used to be. You've outgrown the container of your former self. And the truth is, this quiet disconnection is sacred, because something deep within you has begun the alchemical process of individuation. Jung described this as the unfolding of the self, the gradual emergence of who you truly are beneath the roles, attachments, and inherited patterns. But individuation comes at a cost. You may feel guilt for pulling away. You may question your loyalty, your memory, your very identity. After all, the past shaped you. It held you. Sometimes it even saved you. But now it confines you. It's like wearing clothes that once fit, but now restrict your movement. And no matter how sentimental they are, the truth remains. They're not meant for the person you are becoming. This emotional detachment doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means your soul is asking you to care differently. Not out of habit, but out of alignment. You're being called to release, not in bitterness, but in reverence. Because the past was never meant to be a prison. It was meant to be a bridge. And now you're standing on the other side, ready to take the next step into unfamiliar territory. But unfamiliar does not mean unsafe. In fact, this distance you're feeling is protection. It's life's way of clearing out the noise, the distractions, the outdated narratives that no longer serve your evolution. Yes, it may feel lonely. There will be days you miss the comfort of what once was. But notice, beneath the loneliness is something else. Spaciousness, a calm, a strange peace that tells you, this is right. You're exactly where you're meant to be. You're not running away, you're returning to your center. This disconnection isn't about rejecting your past, it's about reclaiming your future. The people and places that truly belong in your life will meet you at your new level. Those who no longer align will gently fall away, not because you stopped loving them, but because you started loving yourself enough to move forward. So when your old life begins to feel like a faded photograph, honor it, hold it with gratitude, then let it go. Because what awaits you is not a repetition of what was, but the revelation of what could be. And in this sacred space of detachment, you are free to become. Sign number 3. You begin to question what truly matters. It begins like a gentle unraveling. What once excited you, the chase for titles, the accumulation of things, the applause of the crowd, starts to lose its grip. You no longer feel driven by the same ambitions. The promises of success begin to sound hollow. The glitter fades, and in its place rises a quiet, persistent question. What am I really doing all this for? Carl Jung often spoke of the moment when a person wakes up from the trance of collective values and begins to listen, truly listen, to the voice of the self. That moment is not loud. It does not announce itself. It creeps in through discontent, through boredom, through the haunting realization that you've been living someone else's definition of a good life. You look at the goals you've pursued so fervently and ask yourself, were they ever really mine? The car, the house, the status, the perfectly curated image, all of it once brought a sense of pride. But now, it feels performative. You wore the mask so well, you forgot it was a mask, until one day, it cracks, and beneath it, something deeper calls out, not for more, but for meaning. You begin to long for experiences that nourish you from the inside. A quiet walk where you feel the breath of trees. A conversation that doesn't skim the surface but dives into the soul. A connection that doesn't demand performance, only presence. You stop asking, "Oh, how do I look?" and start asking, "How do I feel?" You stop chasing the spotlight and start searching for light within. And this shift is radical because it turns the entire world you knew on its head. It challenges everything you've been taught to value. It asks you to let go of shoulds and start living from want, not the shallow wants of ego, but the deep wants of soul. You may find yourself drawn to simplicity, to authenticity. You may leave behind the busyness that once gave you a false sense of importance and choose stillness instead. You may stop saying yes to obligations that drain you and begin saying yes to what truly energizes you, even if it doesn't look impressive on the outside. And slowly, gently, you realize a life that looks good isn't the same as a life that feels true. Jung believed that true freedom comes when we stop living from the outside in and begin living from the inside out. That is what you're doing now. You're rewriting your values, not from fear or conformity, but from clarity. And this clarity, this inner realignment, is not a detour, it's the beginning of coming home, to yourself. Sign number 4, your intuition begins to grow louder. Something strange starts to happen. You begin to feel things before you understand them. You walk into a room, speak to a person, hear an idea, and something in you instantly knows, not with logic, not with facts, but with a silent certainty that defies explanation. At first, you might dismiss it. We've been taught to value the rational mind above all, to trust data, not feeling, to demand proof, not presence. But then it happens again and again. A quiet whisper rises within you, subtle but persistent. Don't go there. Speak up. Wait. This is it. Carl Jung called this intuition the language of the unconscious, the voice of the self trying to guide you through the noise of the outer world. It's not dramatic. It doesn't shout. It whispers until you start listening. And once you do, everything begins to shift. You no longer need to overthink every decision. You stop exhausting yourself trying to control every outcome. You don't need everyone's opinion before you move forward, because now you have something more powerful than certainty. You have trust, not in the world, but in yourself. This growing intuition isn't magic. It's the result of something deeper. You're becoming more whole. You've started integrating the parts of you that were once ignored, dismissed, or shamed. And with each piece that returns to your awareness, the signal from within grows stronger. What you're experiencing is not confusion. It's clarity without explanation. A knowing that comes not from the mind, but from the soul. You begin to sense energy, to read silence, to detect truth, even when words lie. You don't always know why you feel what you feel, but you've lived long enough to understand. Feelings are data, too, and sometimes they're wiser than thought. Jung believed that the unconscious speaks in symbols, in sensations, in subtle cues. And when we stop resisting the inner world, when we stop trying to explain everything away, we give those signals space to rise. And they do. In dreams that stay with you, in goosebumps without reason, in that inexplicable peace you feel when you finally say no. This is not illusion. This is your deepest wisdom making contact. And as you begin to honor it, your life begins to realign. Decisions feel lighter, paths reveal themselves, and even when the road is uncertain, you're no longer afraid, because you know you're being guided by something real, not external, not conditional, but rooted in the very core of your being. You're not following the map, you're following the compass. And that compass is not broken. It was just buried, beneath conditioning, fear, and noise. But now, you're listening. And because of that, your steps are quieter but more powerful. Your choices are simpler, but more aligned. And your life begins to feel like yours. So don't wait for proof. Feel the pulse within. That is yourself whispering, "This way." Sign number 5. You feel an intense desire for self-growth like never before. There comes a moment, quiet but unmistakable, when comfort begins to feel like a trap. The routines that once felt safe now seem stale. The distractions you once welcomed begin to lose their taste. You look around and realize the old ways no longer nourish your soul. And something inside you stirs, not softly, but with urgency, a yearning, a call, a fire that says, "There is more to me than this." You find yourself seeking, not for escape, but for expansion. You begin devouring books that once seemed irrelevant. Conversations that used to bore you now spark curiosity. You scroll past the surface level and crave depth, insight, transformation, truth. You're no longer interested in being entertained. You want to evolve. This isn't ambition in the traditional sense. It's not about chasing success, approval, or recognition. It's something far more sacred. It's the hunger to remember who you really are. Carl Jung believed that real growth comes not from climbing upward, but from diving inward, from peeling back the layers of social conditioning, inherited trauma, and outdated self-images until you reach the untouched center of your being. And now you're starting to do just that. You revisit your childhood wounds not to dwell in them, but to understand them. You question your beliefs, not to rebel, but to align. You try new things, not to impress, but to awaken. You are no longer satisfied with living a version of yourself edited for survival. You want wholeness. You want the kind of strength that comes not from pretending to be invulnerable, but from confronting your shadows with courage. The kind of wisdom that isn't quoted from someone else, but discovered through your own pain, mistakes, and breakthroughs. You start to see growth everywhere. In the tension, in the discomfort, in the not yet. Even your suffering begins to feel purposeful, not as punishment, but as a portal into your deeper becoming. The beautiful paradox. The more you grow, the more you realize that you've always had what you were looking for. The books, the teachers, the experiences, they're all mirrors. reflections to help you see what's always been within. This isn't a phase, it's a spiritual initiation. You are becoming the artist of your own life, rebuilding yourself with patience, grit, and love. You are no longer reacting, you are choosing. And in that choice, you are reclaiming the power that once felt so far away. So if you feel restless, if you feel pulled to learn, to heal, to transform, it is not a sign of discontent. It is your soul waking up. It is your future self whispering, "Come closer. I'm waiting." Sign number 6. You feel the urge to walk away from toxic relationships and draining environments. There is a moment, a quiet, powerful moment, when your soul can no longer bear what your mind has normalized. The friendships, the conversations, the obligations that once felt familiar, now feel heavy. You begin to notice the subtle fatigue that follows certain interactions, the way your energy dips, not because of what was said, but because of what was felt. You're not imagining it, you're evolving. And with evolution comes a kind of emotional sensitivity, not as weakness, but as wisdom. You start to hear the quiet tension beneath polite smiles. You sense the manipulation wrapped in concern. You feel and breakthroughs. You start to see growth everywhere, in the tension, in the discomfort, in the not yet. Even your suffering begins to feel purposeful, not as punishment, but as a portal into your deeper becoming. The beautiful paradox? The more you grow, the more you realize that you've always had what you were looking for. The books, the teachers, the experiences, they're all mirrors. Reflections to help you see what's always been within. This isn't a phase, it's a spiritual initiation. You are becoming the artist of your own life, rebuilding yourself with patience, grit, and love. You are no longer reacting, you are choosing. And in that choice, you are reclaiming the power that once felt so far away. So if you feel restless, if you feel pulled to learn, to heal, to transform, it is not a sign of discontent. It is your soul waking up. It is your future self whispering, "Come closer. I'm waiting." The dissonance between words and energy. And suddenly, you can no longer pretend. Where once you feared letting go, now you fear losing yourself. Carl Jung taught us that growth often begins in the shadow, when we confront the patterns that keep us stuck. And toxic relationships are often the mirrors that show us our deepest wounds, the need to be accepted, the fear of abandonment, the tendency to shrink ourselves to be loved. But now, something has shifted. You no longer want to be chosen at the cost of your peace. You no longer want to explain your worth, beg for clarity, or justify your boundaries. The drama that once felt like passion now feels like poison. The loyalty you clung to now looks like self-betrayal, and the silence you once endured now screams for change. This isn't resentment, it's realization. You begin to understand. Love should not hurt more than it heals. Connection should not leave you more confused than clear, and proximity should not cost you your presence. So, you start to detach, not with anger, but with clarity. You stop answering calls that drain you. You step back from circles that no longer resonate. You say no without guilt. You choose solitude over performance. And in doing so, something remarkable happens. You begin to meet yourself again. You realize that the emptiness you feared from letting go is not emptiness at all. It is space. And space is sacred. Because it's in that space that you start inviting people who speak your soul's language. People who don't just hear your words, but feel your energy. People who challenge you gently, love you honestly, and meet you where you are. This isn't about being cold. It's about being conscious. You've stopped seeing loyalty as endurance. You've started seeing it as alignment. And the relationships you now seek are not transactional, but transformational. Carl Jung once said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. And sometimes, we only truly meet ourselves after we walk away from what isn't meant for us." So if you feel the urge to let go, trust it. It is not abandonment, it is self-remembering. And in that remembering, you will find a peace that no external connection could ever provide. Sign number 7. Letting go no longer feels like loss, it feels like liberation. There comes a point in your journey where the weight you've carried simply begins to fall away. Not in a dramatic burst, not in a painful confrontation, but quietly, almost like autumn leaves surrendering to the wind. The routines you once clung to, the goals you once chased tirelessly, even the version of yourself you've spent years building. They begin to loosen their grip. And strangely, you don't resist. Because somewhere deep within you've sensed the shift. You're no longer who you used to be, and you're no longer trying to be. Carl Jung taught that true transformation doesn't come from forcing change, but from allowing what is no longer authentic to dissolve. And in this stage of your evolution, that is exactly what's happening. You're not giving up, you're growing out. What once felt vital now feels misaligned. The hustle no longer excites you. The titles no longer define you. The plans you once thought were the dream now feel too small for the vastness you're stepping into. And perhaps the most beautiful part, you're not panicking. You're not frantically holding on. You're not begging life to return to what it was. Instead, you're breathing more deeply, trusting more fully, and surrendering more softly to the unfolding unknown. Letting go used to feel like failure. Now, it feels like faith. Because you've realized nothing that is meant for your soul's expansion will ever require you to shrink yourself. No path that honors your becoming will ever ask you to stay where you no longer belong. And so, the letting go continues. Of outdated beliefs, of expired roles, of the habits that numbed your truth. There may still be moments of fear. Of course, the mind doesn't like the unfamiliar, but the heart, oh, the heart is already 10 steps ahead. It knows. It's been whispering all along. Release this, it says. There's more waiting. And as you honor that inner knowing, something miraculous begins to happen. You begin to make room. Room for new connections. Room for new dreams. Room for the version of you that was always waiting beneath the layers. You begin to live not out of memory, but out of possibility. Not driven by who you were, but drawn forward by who you're becoming. This is not detachment from life. This is alignment with life. Because as Jung reminded us, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And sometimes the darkness is simply the old that refuses to leave until you invite it to. And now, you have. So let it go. Not with regret, but with reverence. You are not falling apart, you are falling open. And what's waiting to meet you on the other side is nothing less than your most luminous, liberated self. So if life feels messy right now, if you're waking up every morning with more questions than answers, if the old goals no longer excite you, and the people around you no longer feel familiar, then pause, not in fear, but in reverence. Because as Carl Jung revealed, in all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order. You are not falling apart, you are falling into alignment. This isn't the end, this is the clearing, the sacred space that life creates, before it reveals the next truer chapter of you. Chaos is not punishment, it's preparation. You see, we've been taught to fear the in-between, the uncertainty, the silence, the undoing. But the truth is, this is where the soul does its most profound work. This is the womb of transformation, where illusions dissolve, where masks fall, and where your essence finally begins to rise. When logic fails, when plans crumble and clarity escapes you, trust your intuition. That quiet voice inside, the one that speaks in symbols, in feelings, in subtle nudges. It may not give you the map, but it will always point you north. And how do you begin walking this path practically? First, allow what no longer fits to fall away. You don't need to force it. You only need to stop clinging. Relationships, habits, identities. If they feel heavy, they are likely not aligned with where you're going. Second, make space for stillness. Not scrolling, not distracting. True stillness. 5 minutes a day to simply be with yourself, without judgment. Because in silence, the soul speaks clearest. Third, follow the energy. Notice what lights you up, even slightly. Follow the books, the conversations, the ideas that spark something inside you. These are breadcrumbs from the deeper self, leading you home. Fourth, honor your emotions as messengers. Sadness isn't weakness, it's release. Fear isn't failure. It's the sign you're nearing something meaningful. Don't resist what rises. Listen, learn, and let it move through you. Fifth, surround yourself with truth. Not just comfort, not just positivity, but people, content, and practices that reflect the truth of your becoming, even when it's raw, even when it's uncomfortable. And above all, be gentle with yourself. Transformation is not a straight line. Some days you'll feel clear. Other days you'll feel lost again. That's not regression, that's recalibration. You are being reshaped, not by force, but by depth. And in time, you'll see. Everything that once made you feel broken was actually breaking you open. So let this be your reminder. If life feels like it's falling apart, it isn't. It's falling into place. You are not lost. You are being led, not away from yourself, but finally, toward yourself. Toward the life that resonates with your soul's frequency. Toward the version of you that doesn't just exist, but awakens. So breathe, trust the unraveling, and take that next step, not in certainty, but in courage. This is the beginning of the best stage of your life. If this message spoke to your soul, don't let the journey stop here. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive more insights on transformation, self-discovery, and the wisdom of Carl Jung. Join a community of awakened souls choosing truth, healing, and growth.